Yeah, later. There she goes.
New additional warning signs that spell trouble for the auto industry are emerging, unlike we've ever experienced before. In other words, you guys, we have a record amount of repos and delinquencies. Now, this article came out a couple days ago titled Warning Sign, 1.7 million vehicles were repossessed last year. But the really important thing to try to understand is how much is that when compared to prior to COVID in 2019? Because we need some gauge to base this off of. Because when I first see that, obviously, I'm like, wow, 1.7 million people that lost their cars and had their cars taken away. That's a pretty big deal. When we go under the hood and we look at the actual stats going back to 2009, looking at 2019 and looking at 2024, it gives us a better idea of what's actually going on underneath the hood. So for 2024, there were a total of 2.3 million, as you guys can see here, defaults. Defaults led to about 1.7 million repossessions. The default rate right now in 2024 is 3.13%. But again, you guys, we got to really compare this to what it was like before we got into this mess. And we go back to 2019 and we see it's actually kind of close. It is over 2019, but it's kind of close to 2019, whereas in 2019, the default rate was 2.89% and there was 2.1 million defaults. So it's very similar, kind of similar, above it, yes, but similar to 2019. But what's really interesting is it's also over 2009. You guys see in 2009, 2.2 million defaults with a delinquency rate of 4.12%. So we're about 1% under if we just look at 2024. But the urgency of this video is the fact that repos right now are absolutely skyrocketing. So when we look at this year of 2025, you guys are going to notice that the repos are almost double than what they were last year. Historical repos going on right now. Now, when we look at this article, car repossessions approaching record high as delinquency rates soar, we can kind of get a better idea of what's going on right now. And now that we've kind of built up that baseline of what repos were in 2009 and 2019, this is going to make a lot more sense, and then it's going to hit a lot harder. Now, according to data from the Recovery Database Network, or RDN, 7.5 million repossession assignments. The entire year last year, what did we have again? I think 2.3 million. So we're triple that already this year, triple that this year, and the year's not over. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? Did you guys know that? Now, based on historic trends, this figure is expected to reach 10.5 million by the end of the year. It's important to know that that's not repossessions. Those are like assignments for repossessions, right? So what they're saying here is those delinquencies are going to turn into about 3 million car repos. So you see right here, it's projected that over 3 million cars could be repossessed in 2025, a level only reached in 2009 during the Great Recession. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, over 100 million Americans currently have an auto loan. And the nonprofit Consumer Federation of America estimates that their combined auto debt exceeds $1.66 trillion. It notes that this financial burden is becoming more urgent every single day. Many Americans are struggling to keep up with their car loans and falling into delinquency due to soaring car prices and high interest rates, and I also may add a lack of income. This comes against a backdrop of widespread financial pressure facing consumers in 2025, with multiple surveys revealing an increase in the number of people living paycheck to paycheck.
The worst situation probably you've ever seen.
Hey, Anthony, how are you? This is Yusuf.
Yeah, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. So I'm calling about the Hummer EV you got. Let's go ahead and talk about it. You are upside down big time.
Man, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Only $100,000, right? 11,000 miles. All right. What do you want out of the situation? Because you said you owe $168,000, and right now MMR and wholesale is right around 79,000.
I bought the vehicle, you know, when the Hummer first came out. Essentially, when they were marked up over 200,000 at the time. Especially when gas prices were really high last year, and some for about 150, and I was the cheapest one in the U.S. at the time. And I jumped on it and got it. I actually had two vehicles. I had a BMW X6 that was brand new, and I had a Silverado that was pretty new as well. So I traded both those in, but I was negative on both of them. So I added that negative equity talk about a crap show. Put about $25,000 down, and I think that obviously what helped the sale. I honestly should have walked out of there. I was at a pretty big dealership, even got a higher interest rate than I've ever received, which is about 10% interest rate on the vehicle.
What were your payments on the Hummer?
Now it's at $3,300.
I like it. I want it. Let's say I'll offer you $79 for it. Sight unseen. It looks like it's in good condition. You owe $168. We're about $90,000 in negative equity underneath. How would we tackle that?
Mitch, it's likely that not only are we going to exceed any previous year as far as repossessions, it looks like we're going to shatter records when it comes to car repossessions. People purchased cars and trucks back in 2022 at extremely elevated prices with the fear of missing out. Remember the whole chip shortage? Now they're assets. They're starting to realize we're never assets at all, as some of these people are in 6-digit negative equity. So can you kind of just put all this together, and can you talk about how car defaults alone from the consumer, that alone is enough turmoil to crash the American economy?
There's so many problems with what has occurred, and you can see that in the video. One guy's offering basically what amounts to about 40 cents on the dollar, which coincidentally is what happens when those vehicles go to auction. But back up for a minute. Businesses are supposed to have a business model, and that business model is designed and should be designed to make money and for no other reason. Otherwise, don't get into business. Well, price is what you pay and value is what you received. So the original buyer of that Humvee received zero value. In fact, he was negative. He was totally upside down the day he bought the vehicle. So that's financial suicide in and of itself. And then, okay, we're going to triple up the repossessions. First Brands is in trouble. Tricolor is bankrupt. Their bonds got wiped out. These are all things associated with the auto industry. So what's really happening here? And when somebody says, well, it's 3.13% as the default, well, no, it's not. 3.13% of what? Segment that you're in, which is high credit risk loans? No, it's not. I'd be shocked if it wasn't closer to 30% default rate in that segment. It's not fair to say that it's 3.13% of the entire industry of the automobile sales. It's got nothing to do with it. Everything has to be segmented. That comes down to the business model, and they've blown the business model. Now, isn't it interesting that as I keep pounding the table, nothing else matters other than the median household income. If they were running a legitimate business model, they would be able to realize that people have home loans, they have rent, they have their car payments, they have credit cards, student loan debt, healthcare, insurance, food. When you understand what your business model is, you can track every single one of those elements all the way down to the people that are borrowing your money, your high risk credit, and using that money for wrong purposes. And that is exactly what that buyer did of the Humvee. He had no business. He was proud of himself. Well, I had these cars and I was upside down. Yeah, well, now you're paying the price, but so is society. Why? Because those vehicles are going to end up on the auction block at 35 to 40 cents on the dollar. Those banks, whoever the bigger bank was, more than likely this is a shadow bank under the hood. Shadow bank is going to take the hit. Do they survive? Probably not. The people that they borrowed the money from, that's the bigger banks. Are they going to take the hit? Yeah. But you see, who ends up in the better position? It's the person that ends up buying it from the auction at extreme discount. But look at the economic damage that's occurring all the way up the chain. And if that 7 million vehicles ends up in the same problem, well, that proves that the auto industry is being supported in reality by bad business models, more than likely in the case of Tricolor, straight up fraud.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, it's a bad model for the consumers as well. And I will like to say that this situation with auto loans right now is a perfect example of why fundamentals like income matter so much. If the fundamentals were there, meaning that people could afford these cars, we wouldn't have historical high record shattering repos on the way. And so again, it's a perfect example of that. And then I got to keep asking Mitch, like, how much debt default can the US continue to get in before officially kicking off recession? Now, in order to answer that question, to help answer that question, I'm going to go back and I'm going to show the viewers how much roughly debt was defaulted in the global financial crisis. And then we're going to take a look at the 4 companies, at least 4 companies, the 4 main companies that have recently gone bankrupt, one on the verge of bankruptcy. And then we're going to see how much debt is actually defaulted on. Let's start with the GFC. I've been getting information anywhere between 1 to 1.5 trillion. This is saying, Wikipedia is saying the total losses was in the trillions, but that's globally. When we look at only the US, again, you guys, it just depends on the data. So I'm going to go with the higher number, and I'm going to take 1.5 trillion. So 1.5 trillion roughly in debt was defaulted. That basically kicked off the global financial crisis. The ABS, or the asset-backed security market, the non-real estate asset-backed security market, is at 1.6 trillion, a little bit higher than the total amount of debt that it took to kick off the global financial crisis. Now let's take a look at a few of the companies that are starting to go under in the auto industry, starting with subprime lender First Help Financial, which was put on a watch for ratings downgrade. Now, this is the next one in line of essentially being chopped. This is a subprime auto lender that probably is selling bonds with AA rating. Kroll Bond Rating Agency is eyeing a potential uptick in losses across subprime auto lender First Help Financial securitization transaction as loan performances worsen. So right now what's happening is First Help is starting to find out that these people aren't making their payments, and that is drastically affecting this company. So First Help is one. With First Help, they got about $1 billion in debt that is at dangerously close to being in default. So we're going to say $1 billion in losses for First Help. Then we're going to move on over to Prima Lend Capital, because they have recently filed bankruptcy as well. Now, it's a little bit smaller of a company, but the auto industry subprime lender and 2 affiliates filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection to restructure its debts and seek a sale of its asset. They have about $286 million in debt. Now, the interesting thing here is it's not just ABS, which, remember, that's asset backed. So they got $186 million in senior secured debt. But somehow they also have another $75 million in senior unsecured notes and another $24 million in junior subordinated debt. So these people are loaded in debt, and they're probably loading their pockets with that debt, because as you see here on this article, this came out a couple of days ago, missing billions and a secretive CEO, the First Brands bankruptcy, an automaker brand company, filed for bankruptcy. And as you guys see here, they have about $2 billion in debt. Absolutely shocking. And it's not just them. Everyone remembers Tricolor. Tricolor Auto Holdings is a Dallas-based chain of used car dealerships and a major subprime lender, has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcies and will liquidate its assets. Now, the interesting thing here is it doesn't quite list how much in liabilities it has. It just says, as of the September 10th filing, the U.S. bankruptcy court in Texas listed between 1 and 10 billion in both assets and liabilities. So more than likely, it's probably going to be the worst. I'm just going to take 10 billion and I'm going to add all this together, so don't worry. Meanwhile, the percentage of auto loans that fell 30 days past due was a whopping, shocking actually, 8% in Q2 of 2025. And when we look at the total amount of debt for auto loans, it's sitting at 1.56 trillion. So when we multiply that 1.56 trillion by the default rate of 8%, that gives us another $125 billion in debt that's currently in delinquency. It's about $138 billion right now, at least, in debt that's not going to be paid. These are massive losses, and we haven't even talked about commercial mortgage-backed securities, credit cards, buy now, pay later, school loans, the mortgages that are behind. We're only talking about the car market. Mitch, can you explain and articulate to the viewers how bad potentially defaulting on $138 billion of debt, and that's up front, right? How bad would that really be on banks?
It's a circular argument. And I want to go back for 1 second on something that Travis said, which was the idea of people claiming we're not in a recession. We need to change the definition of a recession, as the government has done 13 times since the creation of the Federal Reserve. The original definition was clear. We're in a recession. We've been there for well over a year and a half. But let's change this definition once and for all because it's offensive, because it's delusional. Recession is a government definition as to what it is that they want it to be by saying that right now we're not in a recession. The problem is we're in a depression. Why? Because it's mom and pop. It's those people that can't make those payments on their vehicles. It's mom and pop that can't make the payments on that list that I went over, including insurance and healthcare, mortgage and rent. And they can't make that happen because of the inflation, which is a fraud, which was created by the Federal Reserve. And that is why they can't make these payments. It's the inflation. It's the cost of living. So those people are in a full-blown depression. They're bankrupt. And that's what you're seeing coming out now in the form of these cars. And then the answer to Travis's question, okay, at the 165 billion, that's a drop in the bucket. This is a compound circular argument, all coming back to the inflation that has been created by virtue of the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury printing money that isn't backed by assets. This problem is going to magnify. What you're seeing now is, again, a drop in the bucket. This is not going to stop. The only way to make this stop is to get the fraud out of the system. And we're going to end up, it's just a compound argument. Every time they go to print money, you come back at quantitative easing, you're going to run into this problem. There are ways to deal with this. I mean, you could slow the Treasury production down, but so far, the governments across the globe, not just US, but across the globe, have refused to do it. This is not going to end well. So the idea that while we're in a recession, we're not in a recession is utter fantasy. Those people who have lost their homes, those people who are losing their cars, those people who are losing their jobs, they're in a full-blown depression.
Yes, sir.
They don't have the money. Well, who caused it?
Mm-hmm.
Put the blame where it's supposed to be. You print money, you cause inflation. Inflation is a hidden tax, and it's a fraud.
I mean, and you're going to see the problems on my last segment. I'm going to show people the prices of cars. So this is probably going to get worse. But Mitch, do you think that, yes, the problem is already magnifying, right? And there's no sign of that even slowing down because the cost of living is out of control. I mean, we've hit the wall, right? Yeah. Most people, many people, millions of people, we've hit the wall. There's still people that have money, good for them. But do you see a lot more bank failures happening as a result of the debauchery in the auto industry?
We've run this math as recently as about 90 days ago on these banks, and our conclusion was that about 600 out of the 4,700 are toast. There's just simply no way to save them. Now, governments will print money, governments will do things, but economically, based on the business model of what they're supposed to be doing, no, they're not going to survive.
This is going to get a lot worse, at least in my opinion, for mom and pop and for the banks and for the dealerships, because again, the repos are blowing up, the defaults are blowing up, and they still haven't created a system to create more affordable cars. New car prices climbed 22% since 2019. But look at this, guys. A recent CPI report has shown the new vehicle index ticking up and down slightly throughout 2025. But overall, there's a 0.7% increase year over year. So again, new car prices going up, used car prices going up. You guys see that right here. Used car prices reached a record level during the pandemic and have remained there. In August, the average transaction price of a 3-year-old vehicle was $31,000. That's insane, according to Edmunds. This was near the all-time record high of $31,600 in 2022 and a 5.5% increase year over year. Let's go to this video, boots on the ground, and he's gonna walk a repo lot. Because again, you guys, this is not gonna get better. Why would it get better? Prices are going up, unaffordability is getting worse, delinquencies, repos, it's all falling apart, and they can't even sell the repos.
The repo lot in Atlanta, Georgia. Finna check out all these repos. People done that repo up in Atlanta. I see a lot of Range Rovers, a lot of BMWs, and a lot of trucks. We got a little white Range Rover. Beautiful black with red interior and carbon fiber trim. I like this. 2021 Range Rover Sport V6 Turbo. Love the interior on that repo. 2020 Dodge Durango. 2021 Kia K5. Nissan Murano, little Kia Forte, boom, Camaro RS, 23 Camaro RS. And yes, all as far as your eye can see behind me, these are all bank repossessed vehicles.
Mitch, maybe you can go into this one more time. What does the historical high prices and historically high repos tell us not only about banks, but also what does it tell us about consumers?
The problem is that yesterday we went through a detailed analysis comparing the income and expense statement of a corporation and tying it directly to the income and expense statement of mom and pop. They're identical. You have income, you have expenses. The difference between the corporations is that they can generally figure out a way how to generate more money, whereas mom and pop can't because the salaries are fixed. So the idea that the vehicles in today's world are starting to go up, not down, well, that's going to lead to the simple fact that A, they're not going to end up selling the vehicles. They're going to sit on the lots. They're going to have to discount them. Or B, they're going to end up selling the vehicles, but within a year and a half, 2 years, just like that 23 Camaro you just showed, that's less than 2 years old, and it's already at the auction block. So by not looking at the median household income for all these business models, that's the default trigger. If you don't understand who your clients are and who's buying your asset, what it is that you're producing, then on one hand you claim, well, we produced this asset for GM, Chrysler, Tesla, et cetera. You produced an asset that's currently on your books that you're going to sell, ideally at a profit. Well, what happens when that comes back? So look at those entities that factored those car sales. Those are the shadow banks. They're not going to make it because they took a hit. Their equity will get hit. If they're able to move it off to a fourth tier company, maybe, but then that fourth tier company will get wiped out. So no matter how you look at this, all the way up and down this economic chain, if you buy a vehicle at face value, market value today, this is the problem with such vast depreciation. The second you drive it off the lot, it's worth 30% less. Sit still for 2 years, it's worth 60% less. These cars are basically being built and sold as junk within 3 years. There's no value left in them. And remember what I said at the very beginning, price is what you pay and value is what you receive. Are you not better off going to the auction, taking your shot at the auction and buying something at 30 or 40 cents on the dollar? At least you know where the bottom is. At least you know what the risk is as defined risk. Buying it off a car lot on something you can't afford, it's economic suicide. And then the people that are producing the cars, well, they're culpable in their own failure because they never understood, and nor did they more than likely care who is it that's buying the cars. Basically, they become their own pump and dump machine.
Well, yeah, pump and dump, and you can't pump and dump without apathy. So would you say that the car industry, I mean, it's close to the perfect example of greed versus apathy in that these cars are way overpriced when compared to median income. People are still buying them. That's the apathy. They're now going default, right? They're all going back to the bank. That's greed and apathy combined, hurts mom and pop. Isn't autos the perfect example of apathy and greed? They don't need these cars. You just said it. They're losing as soon as they drive off the lot.
There's been cases in history. Mercedes has done it as well. So they produced cars where the cost to build the car was $300,000. They were a loss leader. The idea was, we'll show the world how good a vehicle we can build. But you're building a vehicle at a cost where the amount of buyers is minuscule. So that happens. I mean, they have auto races with the idea, we'll show the world how good it is we can race a car. Doesn't necessarily mean that that transfers down to the actual vehicle. It's part of the salesmanship of what they do. The problem is in today's world, that's okay when you've got the economic wind behind your back. The problem is in today's world, you don't have the economic wind behind your back. What you have is a sustained fraud right in front of you, and people are running into that fraud. They can't quite detect it because it's extremely well hidden by virtue of the marketing. But you can feel it, you can see it when you go to the grocery store. You can see it right now here by virtue of what Travis is showing you with these auctions. These auctions wouldn't exist to this amount of volume, brand new cars, less than 2 years old, less than 11,000 miles. It wouldn't exist if there wasn't stress in the economy. You can see it. So all the advertising in the world is not going to fix what's in your wallet. To participate and say, well, I want to keep up with the Joneses next door, the odds are the Joneses are levered to the eyeballs and they'll be handing back their car.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'll say, Mitch, in conclusion, and this is to the viewers, if there's anyone watching this that's on the fence about whether or not they should buy a car or a new car, especially a new car, I'm going to help you guys out right now. But no, I'm not a financial advisor. The answer is whether or not you should buy a car. Absolutely not. If you guys buy a car right now at peak prices, remember, you absolutely destroy your purchasing power. And if you've been waiting to buy a house or other investments, remember that payment, especially that guy was paying $3,300 a month, is going to limit the amount of money he can borrow for hard investments like land, even a home, if he can find a home that's well under market value. So understand, a lot of people, what they're doing right now is they're trading in the ability to purchase a home in the future for purchasing a car right now. So they're trading those things. And it gets even worse because if they stopped paying, they then kicked out their ability to purchase a home for at least 5 to 6 years because now they have a repo on their credit. So it's really important right now that as consumers in America, we stop. We stop as best as we can spending money. We start remembering how important it is to save money. We start saving money. We create our goals. We go after them, but never, ever forgetting that we need to love people, we need to remain hopeful, and we need to help lift people up. Every single person right now is in this together. We are all victims of these crimes, and we can only get out of this problem together. So don't forget that, guys. And having said that, happy rate cut Wednesday. Go to Mitch's website if you guys need to know what's going on with all of the debauchery, the bond debt, the abolishing property taxes. I want you guys to go there right now if you haven't been there. Just quickly go there. Look at how much information this man has compiled. Go to mockingbirdproperties.com and then /DCAT. Go right now. And then when you're done, go to my website and see all of the free training I have. I've been a residential loan officer for over 20 years, a realtor for over 10 years, a CE certified instructor for 4 years. You guys, I have a wealth of knowledge that I've given back to you guys for free. Just go take a look at it. I hope you guys start taking us up on the offer to empower yourself with the content we've created. Now, other than that, guys, if you're out there investing in cars, real estate, your life, whatever it is, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.